Hello, everyone. You are all very welcome to our third Link and Learn webinar of 2023. My name is Dave Farley, Head of Membership Services at Learnovate, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items to cover. We like to ensure that our events are as inclusive as possible, so please use the option to add subtitles if required. Simply click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat on the right to ask questions. My Learnovate colleagues are available on chat to respond to any of your queries. We are also running a poll. If you would like to participate, just click on the poll beside chat. Our poll today is looking at whether you feel there are ways to harness AI to improve learner engagement. For those of you attending today that are not familiar with Learnovate, we are a technology centre funded by Enterprise Ireland and the IDA. We are hosted by Trinity College Dublin, the leading university in Ireland. For more than 10 years, we have been generating successful industry-led research in education and learning technology. Our research now being very focused on the future of work and learning. If you are interested in finding out more about our research or our membership model, please do not hesitate to contact us via our website. Today, we are looking at learner engagement and motivation. And we are delighted to be joined by my colleague, Peter Gillis, who is a lead researcher and innovation team lead at Learnovate. Peter has carried out extensive research on learner engagement and motivation and is going to share these findings with you today. We will share his slides after the presentation, but please do not hesitate to contact us if this topic resonates with you and you would like to hear more. After Peter's keynote, we will take a short networking break. This is a fun, friendly, and informal way to meet some of the attendees at today's webinar. Simply click the networking button on the left of your screen and you will be popped into a virtual room where you will meet one of your fellow attendees. To facilitate your conversation, we encourage you to discuss the following question. Do you feel that learner engagement has increased or decreased since remote working and learning became more prevalent? After you have finished networking, don't forget to return to the stage by hitting the stage button in the menu on the left of your screen. Today, our panel will look at learner engagement and motivation. And as AI is the topic on everyone's lips at the moment, we will of course take a look at AI and the effect this emerging technology will have on today's topic. We are delighted to welcome Maeve Daly of Mastercard, who will chair today's panel. And she will be joined by Morrissey of Intuition, Greta Stahl of Workday, and Paraic Hegarty of Akari software. It's great to see 4 Learnovate patron members joining the panel discussion today. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Peter to the stage. Welcome, Peter, and over to you.
Thanks a million, Dave, and hi, everybody. Really happy to be here and really pleased to be able to share some of our research that we're currently doing in this area of specifically motivation for learning in a digital world. So if I can get my slides up there. So motivation, as Dave said, is an area of focus in terms of my research interest and obviously linked to learning. But we have to take into account this whole idea of learning moving toward a much more digital and blended environment. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about here today. So brief idea of what we're going to cover. The whole idea of let's just take a little bit of time to reflect on what is motivation and what are the implications for learning in a digital world. And then I want to just briefly go through 2 pieces of research that are ongoing in the center at the moment. One focus on the whole idea of designing in motivational supports, basically ensuring that the environment is as good as it can be to support motivation. But ultimately, there will also be people who might fall off that motivational ladder. And what supports could we provide for them in these situations? So they're the 2 pieces of research we'll cover. So what is motivation? You know, we often hear sort of cross references to the word motivation and engagement, but it's probably helpful to just distinguish between the 2. Of course, there's crossover, but they are quite distinct. You can see a definition there of engagement on the left, and specifically with regards to learning. So it is that idea of, you know, promoting the attention, curiosity, and interest. And even if you just say it to yourself, if you felt engaged at some event or some learning intervention, it is that idea that you're listening, you're connecting, you're doing the activities, and working with others. And let's just move on a bit to look a little bit deeper into this. I wouldn't know one end of a horse from the other, but I know who Rachel Blackmore is. And I know she's an outstanding athlete, first female to win the Grand National, and I think the Cheltenham Cup as well, and an absolute fantastic ambassador for her sport. If she were to have a talk here today, I've no doubt I'd be engaged in that conversation. And in fact, I might pick up some fantastic tips from Rachel around the whole idea of having a positive and can-do attitude. But let's just pause that for a second. If we move to motivation, and again, a definition, we see it's a driving force or forces responsible for the initiation, persistence, direction, and vigor of goal-directed behavior. And it's that goal-directed behavior that's the differentiator. So going back to the Rachel Blackmore story, yeah, I was engaged, but I may not have set out with a specific goal. Now, if I contrast that with Lisa Legault here, who I've never had the pleasure of hearing speak, but Lisa is a psychology researcher specifically dedicated to the area of academic motivation. So as I say, I don't know if she's a good or bad speaker, but I would have a goal if Lisa was presenting, and that would be to learn from her. And I hope you can see that difference, that it starts off with a goal, and that goal can, of course, be various sorts. It can be, as I just described, the ability to improve my own learning, or of course, it can be a lot others, and we'll discuss them now. So what are the implications when we think of motivation, this idea of supporting goal-directed behavior in the digital world? And you know, COVID is what really brought this into focus for us in Learnovate. The whole idea that what we've been talking about, researching and promoting, suddenly became a reality overnight. And the world did a fantastic job of moving us to that online learning world. But we didn't really have the time to consider the motivational aspects. We basically had a very practical aspect of getting online quickly. So if we go back and think, what are the implications just for motivation in terms of the digital world? Let's look at hybrid as a model. So there are many different forms of digital learning, but if we take the hybrid model as an example, it's this idea that there's a synchronous element, a real-time element, where some students may be at a lecture in a classroom, but others are joining that same lecture virtually from home. It would also contain asynchronous aspects too, where again, events, pre-recorded materials, etc., might be getting worked in class and also in the online environment. You can see a list of tools that realistically you're going to need to support that hybrid model. And I'm just using it as an example. Blended is obviously another version where we have people all online at one time maybe, and then all in class at another time. And then we have obviously fully online as well. These are all models of how learning's evolving in the digital world. What does this mean for motivation? So the hybrid model benefits are listed as you can see here. It's flexible, it's synchronous opportunities. So unlike purely online, hybrid does still offer those opportunities to connect. Gives a bit of freedom of academic exploration and more efficient use of resources. I feel there's a couple could be added to that. First is accessibility. This online blended digital world does provide us with the ability to provide wider accessibility. And ultimately, with this more efficient use of resources, also the ability to potentially expand the diversity of learner that we can reach. But moving that back to motivation, what should we consider? I'm using one theory of motivation here, self-determination theory. It is a broad framework for the study of human motivation. It's around since 1985. It's considered one of the solid theories and actually has quite a bit of focus in the area of education, which makes it useful as a theory for us to understand. And self-determination theory talks about three basic psychological needs that humans have. And these three basic psychological needs are seen to traverse culture, countries, etc. Even in societies where potentially group work is not considered important, these three basic psychological needs are seen as robust. The first is this idea of autonomy. We like to feel that we're making the decision to engage in a behavior ourselves. We're not being coerced or forced. The idea of competence, that, okay, we may need to stretch ourselves, but actually, ultimately, we are capable of interacting and moving forward with an exercise. And finally, relatedness, that whole area of a sense of community, of interacting with our peers and potentially the student cohort, the lecturing cohort, and others within our community. Even just thinking about those three areas, we can start to see the challenges that potentially get brought in when we think of learning in a blended, hybrid, or digital world. Associated with the psychological needs are the motivational processes. Now, I'm pretty sure that everybody on this call is probably reasonably familiar with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic, that idea of doing it basically for our own fulfillment, and extrinsic, that idea of doing it to get us to another reward. Now, that other reward can vary. It could be actually to get a job, it could be to get the degree, it could be to be recognized by our peers or family. So it's quite wide, but it's all about this idea that I'm engaged in the activity for where it can get me to. But I draw your attention to the last one there, amotivation. And it's the third dimension of these motivational processes. And it's internally held negative beliefs around our ability, effort, value, and task characteristics. So I don't feel I'm able to do this. I don't think I can put the effort in. I don't value this. And I find the tasks distasteful or boring. So we have a combination of autonomy, competence, relatedness, intrinsic, extrinsic, and motivation. Lenses to consider the blended environment in if we want to support motivation. As I mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about two projects. The first is Remotivate, and it's around that idea of trying to design in to the learning experience motivational supports. The second one is about Amotivation TNT, and that's that idea of bringing support to individual students when needed and understanding, can we actually target the aspect of amotivation at play and therefore address it directly. So Remotivate, how might we scaffold and sustain learner motivation to engage with hybrid and remote environments over time? And the overtime is really important, because if we're talking about a semester, it might be okay and easy for us to design a situation that might work for a class. But when students are engaging over time with these kind of blended environments, what can we do to support them? Now, this project is a core research project within Learnovate, and the list of organizations you can see across the bottom are the working group associated with it. It's an ongoing project. It's been going for about 2 years now, and we'll talk about that a bit later. First to say, we set about our research. We did an awful lot of research into the whole area of motivation for learning, how that affects in blended environments. And from that, we produced a report. And we may have ended that project there, but we actually saw that there was potential for us to have impact as a research center in what we might be able to do with the findings from this report. And we felt that potentially there was a framework to be investigated that could support learners in these environments. We found that there was 24 components across 4 layers within this framework. And what you can see here is the innermost layer, which is the learner's own readiness to work within one of these environments. And you can see the different components around preparing a learner's motivation to engage with these kinds of environments. So for instance, if I just draw your attention to online work skills up there at the top left, go back to the motivational aspect of competence. this idea that they actually have the skills to engage with the technologies required to learn in these environments. Plus others all the way around. Self-directedness down there at about 5 o'clock, associated with the whole idea of autonomy. There's a certain amount of self-directedness required. Have we got supports in there to promote that idea of autonomy? Moving out of there, we have the learning environment itself, and what opportunities is it providing to support motivation? Again, you can see ideas like involvement. Is there an opportunity for the students to be involved both in the learning class and also potentially with their partners? Moving out another layer out to the activities themselves. Draw your attention to the one at the bottom, the utility value. Going back to the likes of extrinsic motivation. Do they understand the utility value of what they're learning and what that potentially can do for them? And finally, out to the outer layer, which is the whole idea of the lecturer themselves and the organization. So realistically, if we want to support student motivation, it's important that the lecturers themselves believe in this methodology and once again are competent in delivering in this mode. Now that's a very, very quick, brief outline of, as I say, the 24 different components across the 4 different layers within this framework. What could we do with this framework? So we did some research into support frameworks, and the likes of ISTE in the United States are doing some really good work and taking a lead from their kind of approach. Our next step was to apply motivational theory lenses to these 24 components. And again, through research, through self-determination theory, expectancy value motivation theory, Keller's ARCS theory, which is a design theory of motivation around attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. And bringing these 3 lenses together, started to tease out what might a support component for each of these 24 look like. As I mentioned, this is ongoing work at the moment, but just to give you an idea of what a component might look like. We talked about the online work skills earlier on. And from a motivational perspective, we're saying this should be the ability to confidently access and use the technologies and software needed to perform course-related tasks online. I'm not going to read through this, but as Dave said, the slides will be available afterwards. But I would draw your attention to the structure of it. As I mentioned, we're leveraging the likes of ISTE's framework here. We want it to be flexible. We want it not to be onerous. This one component probably has about 15 pages of research behind it, but we want it to be practical and have effect in colleges as a framework. And in terms of its effectiveness for colleges, we see it has 2 roles. One, it obviously allows us to check across the 24 components where we might be at right now, and 2, provide a roadmap for where we might see improvements are required. Now, some of these might look obvious, but I would draw your attention, say, maybe to the last one. At the module level, early opportunity for a group project where they test themselves on the digital skills. So they get a go at it, they get a run at it. It isn't being judged academically. This is purely a project where they get to go in and test, have they got these online work skills to the level they need. Fantastic interest in this project, I have to say, from colleges. And when we have this framework complete, hopefully before the end of this year, we will be testing this with 2 colleges that have already identified as being interested in seeing how this goes in the real world. And that will be the trial. We don't accept that everything in here is right. That's what we'll trial and see where we go from here. It is research. I'm going to move on. So that's about designing the environment to be ready for the learning. Now let's just think about when students still fall down from a motivation perspective. And that's where this Motivation TNT project comes in. And the whole idea of the TNT is targeted nudging techniques to see if we can boost student motivation. You can see some statistics here. This project is focused on first-year undergraduate or first-year third-level students. And that figure from the research down there of 29% reporting this kind of motivational concern is something that over the last few years as we've carried out this research resonates time and time again. it seems to be that about approximately 1/3 of students in first-year undergraduate are suffering from this motivational deficit. Let's flip back to self-determination theory. We talked about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. As I say, they're the very popular ones. But as a research center and from an innovation perspective, we always like to start with the problem. And as we briefly touched on earlier, amotivation is that negative aspect of motivation, and academic amotivation specifically is related to not just like an apathy, but some strongly held negative beliefs. Those negative beliefs span out into 4 specific areas. We talked briefly about it a few minutes ago, the idea that I don't have the ability, I can't put the effort in, I don't value the outcome of this, and task characteristics are not interesting to me. Strongly held negative beliefs, and the research has shown that these are associated significantly with negative outcomes, as indicated here on the screen. So in this case, we can see that ability is negatively associated with performance and self-esteem, and value is negatively associated with dropout and problem behaviors. And in our research project, we decided to just focus in on those 2 to see if we can understand and support students who are suffering from these particular aspects of our motivation. Nudges. We were not committed to using nudges. In fact, we were very wide open to understanding any sort of intervention that might support students. But with some research into nudges and their use in education, it seemed like a good tool to try in this research, because they do preserve that freedom. They have that idea that you're guiding a decision, but you're not forcing it. And this screen here is kind of representing the dream of where we'd like to go. In this digital and blended world, students are leaving a lot of breadcrumbs around their activity. They've got their submissions, were they on time, were they late? They have their activity on the virtual learning environments. There's quizzes, there's their attendance record, there's their grade point average, and there's their participation in wider groups within the institution. All this activity, we can link back to the previous slide, to those negative feelings of behavior. And if we could profile these activities of a student, would we then be able to profile which sub-aspects of our motivation were at play? Then looking to the right, if we had a nudge bank of small text messages that have been devised again through motivational theory and with input from tutors and lecturers, which makes them apply at the module level, could we generate an intervention model that, based on this student profile, could send targeted nudges back to the students? So if we say this is our hypothesis, this is what we'd like to think might be possible and could have impact. Looking at the nudges themselves that we might use, these are ones from the research. And in terms of ability, again, I won't read them out, but you can see here just a nudge if ability levels are low, to sort of say, listen, you can do this, and this is maybe a little help. You know, it's going to be very similar to the mini quiz questions you've done, so go back and look at them. Over to the value messages. If the students are not valuing this course, so for instance, the module that was investigated was a computer programming course, but it was for engineering students. And engineering students might be asking, why do I have to learn computer programming? Specifically, if they want to be a mechanical or a civil engineer. So again, just trying to promote the idea, listen, there's a reason for this, you know. Engineers of all kinds need to know how to use computing to solve those engineering problems. So as I say, applying motivational theory and working with the tutors, we developed out this bank of nudges. How did we research it? So we didn't have the ability to track all those breadcrumbs we talk about, but we're looking that there's a psychological tool called the Academic Amotivation Inventory, which is a self-report 16-item inventory that breaks down into these 4 sub-areas of ability. effort, value, and task characteristics. And from this self-report, we were then able to profile the students to see, were they suffering more from an ability perspective or from a value perspective? And on that basis, we assigned them into either the ability group or the value group. And drawing your attention to the middle, as you can imagine, they act as a control for each other, because if I'm sending value nudges, I wouldn't expect any measure of ability to change, and vice versa. We had sent out 5 nudges over 2 weeks, so it's quite a short intervention. And then we asked them to take the survey again, the academic and motivation inventory, and obviously we were looking to see had we had any impact. At this stage, we've trialed with over 220 students over 3 trials. The third trial, which finished only about a month and a half ago, had 119 participants from Trinity College Dublin. And as I mentioned, about a third of students report as being amotivated. But we also have all those students who were not amotivated. And as might be expected, if you look to the left there, we can see there was very little difference in the pre in the green and the yellow in the post. Moved from 41.44 to 42.72. Actually a slight increase, but really statistically not significant. Contrast that with the amotivated students, and we can see they dropped from 65.9 down to 62.5 in just a 2-week intervention. So again, using the not amotivated as a control group, no significant difference. But looking to statistically analyze this, we can see, because it was ranked data, we use a Wilcoxon signed rank test, and it showed significance, that there was a statistically significant positive change in the AAI pre and post. And it's significant to the degree of 0.008. And if you're familiar with statistics, you'll know you're looking for 0.05 to show significance. So 0.008 is quite an encouraging level of significance. Now, just to bring that down a little bit and say, what about the targeted nudges? So what we see here is, this is the students who, 1, were amotivated and 2, received the value nudges. Again, you can see directly here, the value and motivation went from 15.69 to 12.92, whereas the ability showed very little movement at all. So we profiled these students as suffering more from value and motivation. We targeted it with value nudges, and the value moved while the ability didn't. Again, strong support for the idea that the targeted aspect was working. You can see that the exact reverse happened when we profile the ability students. So again, they profile more as ability and motivated. We support them with ability nudges, and their ability and motivation dropped significantly, while their value and motivation stayed equal. Strong support for the research we're doing here. This is all about state of mind, and of course, that's what motivation is. It's a state of mind, but it leads to behavior. And just actually, as we're speaking, and I couldn't even get a slide together on it, we're now analyzing behaviors that we tracked with the same groups. And even though it was only a 2-week period, we're starting to see changes that were significant in the associated behaviors. So in terms of value, problem behaviors, and in terms of ability, performance, we're actually seeing that there were significant effects on real world behavior. This research is, just to say, part of my PhD, which will be submitted this September. But we see this moving into Learnovate following that as a project to develop out tools that we can support students with. And then combined with Remotivate, really can provide strong motivational support for students as we move forward in this digital and blended world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. It's always great to hear these Learnovate research updates and share what we are doing with our attendees today, and indeed the wider community at Learnovate. You may wish to follow up on Peter's keynote by listening to our July Inside Learning podcast, which features Peter speaking about learner motivation and engagement with our host, Aidan McCullen. You can find Learnovate's Inside Learning podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. I would now like to invite Maeve from Mastercard to the stage. Welcome, Maeve. I'd also like to welcome Carl, Greta, and Paraic joining our panel discussion today. Maeve, over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to Learnovate for inviting me here today to chair this discussion on learner engagement and motivation. I'm delighted to be joined by a panel with such extensive and diverse experience in the learning field. So let's start by introducing ourselves and sharing why learner engagement and motivation is important to us and our organizations. I'll go first. So I've worked in learning design for over 25 years now, starting with designing content for the University of Limerick and then moving on to designing corporate e-learning and then academic online learning programs and now in Mastercard. So my particular passion is problem-based and discovery type learning experiences. So I'm always looking at how learning technologies can deliver that type of learning experience. As Dave mentioned, I work at Mastercard now, and I'm very fortunate to be the content director for a new learning platform launched last year called the Learning Lab. And that focuses on providing innovative digital learning experiences to our busy corporate learners. So our learners work in fast-paced environment, and considerations around how to motivate them and engage them with our learning formats and experiences that we offer is always top of mind for me and my team. So I'd like to pass over to Carl, and if you could introduce yourself now and share why learner engagement and motivation is important to you and your organization.
Absolutely, Maeve. Thank you, and I'm happy to join this panel today. I've been working in learning and digital learning for 10 years now. I'm head of marketing at Intuition. We're a digital learning organization that have existed since 1985. Probably goes without saying around learner motivation, but it's pivotal to what we do. Our goal on a daily basis is to serve and provide our clients with programs that motivate and inspire their learners. So it's absolutely central to what I do as a professional and what we do as an organization. So I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into this conversation today.
Great, thank you, Carl. And looking forward to hearing your insights on that. And Greta, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Maeve. I'm excited to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Greta Stahl. I am responsible for enterprise learning and development at Workday. For those who don't know us, Workday is an enterprise software company. We have about 18,000 employees globally. I started my career at a large public university in the United States and then shifted for a while over into the field of communications before coming back to learning and development. And I think through my own experience, I'm a big believer in the importance of transferable skills and leveraging the things that you have learned along the way in new places and see the value in bringing that to our organization. I think learner engagement is a critically important conversation because we know that upskilling is going to be incredibly important for business success as we all evolve to keep up with the changing technological and business environment around us. But if we can't get our learners motivated to participate, then we can build as many programs and tools as we want, but they won't do anyone any good. So happy to be part of this important conversation.
That's great. Thank you, Greta. And Paraic, over to you.
Thanks, Maeve. Great to be here today. I'm CTO in Akari software. We provide curriculum solutions to higher education providers, and they allow the curriculum to be designed, managed, mapped, costed, published, included in transnational partnerships and so on. But our core curriculum solution allows academics to design and create multiple patterns of teaching and assessment to ensure learner achievement of the desired learning outcomes. And that includes designing and creating patterns that maintain and rebuild learner engagement and motivation in the process. So we're certainly interested in understanding the various different lenses through which the curriculum can be looked at in order to support learner motivation and remotivation.
That's great. Thanks, Paraic. So I'm really interested and excited to explore this topic with the different perspectives from higher education and the corporate learner perspectives as well. Paraic, I'm going to start with you and let's dig into it straight away and look at, have you any new tools and strategies to support your learners and increase their engagement?
Yeah, Maeve. I mean, and I think that it's important to say that there are many different ways of looking at this, and we've only got part of the picture, which is why it's so exciting to be involved in a panel discussion like this. But, de facto, I guess the remotivating interventions, like those nudges that Peter was talking about, they occur when a motivation has already happened or when it's having an impact. So what we're currently focusing on is looking at what is referred to as individualization of the curriculum. So that's intentional and I suppose pre-design of different patterns of teaching and assessment to avoid amotivation and disengagement from happening in the first place. And that's different to the kind of what we would refer to as personalized approaches. And those personalized approaches are dynamic interventions that occur after the fact based on signals of demotivation and disengagement. So, we're, I suppose, looking at one at the moment, but particularly interested in seeing how that might segue through and looking at the kind of research that Learnovate are doing, and Peter in particular, around that issue of remotivation.
That's really interesting, and it's good to hear that the focus there was really, as well as you said, on the being proactive in the sense of really looking at the fundamentals of the design of the curriculum and the patterns that you're building in there to motivate and engage learners. That's great. Carl, over to you. What are any tools or strategies that you're using at Intuition to motivate and engage the learners?
Yeah, sure. We're constantly looking at tools, approaches, techniques to ensure that our learners remain motivated. Probably the biggest development from our perspective over the last 24 months will be a development of a tool we have called KHX, which is essentially a learning management system for financial services professionals. Our flagship product is, this isn't a sales pitch, by the way. Our flagship product is a suite of digital learning tutorials. What we have found was a bit of choice anxiety crept in with the user base, given that they really didn't know where to start. They had access to all of this content and not really sure what to do with it. So what KHX attempts to do is to contextualize the content in such a way for specific roles and pathways within financial services. And what we found from a motivational perspective is that when the curricula is much more targeted for the individual, they're way more motivated to take training. Just because it's applicable to their role, they can see a pathway towards continuing professional development, and it's just easier. The expectation for the modern professional is access to information after a couple of clicks, which is the right way to go about it. So KHX is our attempt to make it as easy as possible for our learners to access the content they need and as slickly and easy as possible.
That's great, Carl. Yeah, so I think that resonates with everyone here, and Greta, in terms of making it easier for the learners to find what they need. On your side in Workday, any strategies and tools that you're implementing or looking at?
Yeah, I think it's finding what they need. I think it's also understanding the value in what they're getting. I thought that was one piece that was really compelling. And what Peter spoke about is that people need to understand why they should be taking the learning or why they should be completing it and stay engaged. So one of the things that we've really been trying to do is to tie the value of the courses that we're promoting to the things that people will get out of them in terms of skill and career development and what that means for the business. So being very clear about, for example, learning programs that are being promoted by the business because those skills are valuable to some specific objectives that they're tied to, or being very clear about why certain skills that they need to learn are tied to career paths that they're interested in promoting. Like Carl, I'm not here to promote our own product, but we do use a tool within Workday called Career Hub, which allows people to put in not only their own skills, but their skill interests, their job interests, the things that they want to be doing. And it surfaces learning recommendations based on that. So it really helps target not just the recommended learning, but clearly why that learning is necessary for the thing that it is that they're trying to accomplish in their career at that moment. And we find that that type of value statement is helpful to keep people engaged.
Great. Yeah. So again, that really resonates, Greta, that, just that learners need to see the value and the utility of the learning to really engage with it, and that extrinsic motivation that Peter mentioned as well in his keynote. I think another interesting idea as well is the kind of offering varying formats is something that we're doing at Mastercard to help to engage learners, to based on their own preferences and lifestyles. So we've added some new content formats as well as delivery formats to motivate and engage our learners, and that's really, I suppose, with the corporate learners and looking at the limited time that they have and trying to fit the learning into their flow of work, and so we've curated some gamified learning paths, and this is just another way to, as well as having the value of the learning, just to give that extra incentive to engage them, and I suppose the reward and acknowledgement as such for completing it and participating in it is something else that we're looking to do as well. Greta, I'd like to stay with you and on the corporate learning side for now, and maybe we go a bit further into looking at the AI. It's what's on everyone's mind at the moment, and what do you see coming down the line in terms of the emerging world of AI in ways we can improve engagement and motivation for learners?
Yeah, I think we're in a brave new world right now. I think for us in the learning space, much like everyone else, it's a lot about experimentation right now, trying out new tools and thinking about how we're going to leverage what's out there to try and help us better deliver on what we're trying to do. If I go back to the value piece I just talked about, I think AI is really important in that instance, because I think AI and ML that are built into the systems are what are allowing us to surface those recommendations, and the systems get continuously smarter about what they're recommending, right? Every new piece of data about what the learner chooses to click on or chooses not to click on is helping the systems make better recommendations. And so that's really helpful as we think about being able to serve up a personalized or individualized, whatever language we're using, in order to make it really customized to what individual learners need. And then I think as we start to look at the landscape of tools that are coming out for learning and development folks, there's going to be so much opportunity in terms of large language models that are helping us with content development, all sorts of new tools that we're seeing, whether it's video generation, content generation. We're piloting one internally right now that's leveraging AI models to generate higher level engagement in the content that we're actually building. And so I think it's early is what I would say, but I think we're going to see a lot of acceleration in this space over the next 12 to 24 months as those new products that are coming out specific to learning get better and better. And there's higher adoption rates and more data that helps them get better yet still.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, we're all used to getting the targeted suggestions in, the retail and entertainment sector, and Netflix suggesting the movies. So it's really nice to see that, AI can be assistive in that sense in terms of helping our learners and assisting in what they are offered, but also interested in the whole scalability, and using the AI to help produce the content. And Carol, I think you have some interesting thoughts on that as well, if you want to share those.
Yeah, for sure. Greta's point around experimentation is a really apt one. What these tools in the short term will allow individuals and organizations to do is to create content really quickly, really easy, really cheap, to see what works for their group of learners. What would have taken, weeks, sometimes months, in just 12 months ago, is now possible through a proliferation of different tools in, maybe a day, if you know what you're doing. So being able to turn around programs that quickly is quite the game changer. I do think it's fair to say there's video AI creation tools, there's voiceover tools such as 11 Labs. Everybody and their uncle are chatting about ChatGPT and how powerful that platform is. So certainly in the short and medium term, that feels like the engagement game changer for me, is that the layperson can become the course builder without having their years of experience in content development behind them. And I think ultimately that will end up with learning programs within organizations, both corporate and academic, to be really, really incredible. When the numbers are crunched, you can see what's working from a productivity perspective. And I think it will fundamentally improve the learning functions of many, many organizations.
Yeah, that's true. And certainly the ability of AI to support that kind of easier and faster production of content in a more cost-effective way is a significant benefit. And we've started using actually digital humans as well in our presenting our content, and it is engaging as well. But it's obviously it allows us to create more as well. And Paraic, are these developments resonating with you, and how AI might be used to improve learner engagement and motivation?
Yeah, I think so, Maeve. I mean, higher education maybe is, let's say, not quite as advanced as things might be in the world of professional education, but I do think that the lines are getting increasingly blurred. And people talk about lifelong learning, obviously, but that just means that over their lifetime, people are going to be doing what's traditionally higher education, further education, professional education, one after the other, or all at the same time. So we certainly see impacts. Simple things like it's not enough now to provide a catalog of courses that lead to specific fixed qualifications, and you can say, I want to be a project manager. What do I do to become a project manager? So I do think we're going to see, as Greta was referring to, move to more kind of goal-based searching through catalogs, and obviously AI provides a solution to that. And I think a move away from particular qualifications to developing skills profiles. So those could be graduate attributes in our terms, or 21st century transversal skills, maybe more generically. We've certainly had discussions with professional bodies and people who produce frameworks around professional competency frameworks, about how those could be incorporated into catalogs. And that is an area where AI can certainly help, because there's huge levels of detailed mapping that need to happen, so that you can see, well, if I do a particular module, will that help me become an engineer, or will that help me become a finance professional, or will that help me become a project manager? It's very difficult to maintain all of that level of detailed mapping without having some kind of assistive AI technology doing the heavy lifting in the background, and then the person providing the judgment at the end to say, yeah, I'm happy that this is what the outcome will be.
Yeah, so I think what we're all saying really is very much it's an exciting space to have AI and really have AI assist us, in terms of what we need to do. But having the human element in there is really, really important as well as an oversight. So I suppose with that in mind, I'd like to touch on the kind of methodologies and techniques. And Paraic, again, do you feel that these are continuing to be relevant, or that despite the technological advances that we'll still continue to use our methodologies and techniques that we've used over the years?
I do, Maeve. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the fundamentals are the same. I mean, we're not necessarily talking here about doing something entirely new. We're talking about new ways of doing things that people always want to do. So I'm quite skeptical about the hype around AI, particularly generative AI and autonomous AI, as opposed to assistive AI. So I often say that the people who promise that all of our jobs are going to go away, don't really understand what those jobs involve, if that's what they think. So I think that there is a lot coming down the line, but I think anybody pretending that they know what the impact of all of these changes are going to be, I don't think that's possible at the moment. So that's our view around AI. We're doing things with it, so not to, I'm skeptical, but skeptical because we're doing things. So as I say, around that mapping, for example, and around those catalogs, those are interesting spaces where I think it can really add value. And in fact, those are things that people find incredibly time consuming and demotivating from a job perspective. If you told somebody they needed to sit down and map 2,400 learning outcomes across an entire program to the purple book of engineering competences, they would just start crying. So
exactly.
Let's make AI do that instead.
Indeed. And so again, being assistive to the human rather than autonomous. And Carl, I seen you nodding your head there. Do you have anything to add there on tried and tested methodologies.
Yeah, I was nodding in agreement with Paraic. One thing I will say is that we're phenomenally early in the adoption curve of all of this stuff, and until we have a tranche of data information around any different approaches from a methodology perspective, the tried and tested are the way forward. What AI, certainly in the short term, will help facilitate is quicker adaptation of what we already know. So it would make our lives a little bit easier, rather than fundamentally changing how we do business. I have a somewhat cliched saying is that it's evolution, not revolution. Certainly for the moment, in 18 months' time, there may be, a whole bunch of data that suggests learners engage with content in a way that we haven't tried yet, and it's really, really effective. But up until the point that we reach that and we have that information, I believe the role of AI will be helping to facilitate the individuals and the organizations who are building the programs, rather than fundamentally changing the way they do it.
Yeah, and I understand that Learnovate have a study, a research going on at the moment on the teacher versus tech, and I think all the evidence is really saying the same thing. It's to complement, supplement, and enable us to facilitate better learning, and I certainly believe that certain methodologies and techniques will continue to be used, regardless of the advances in technology, like active learning, emphasizing hands-on experiences and student engagement. Another enduring technique, the formative assessment, giving that ongoing feedback, for the students. And then the collaborative learning is one I'm really a big supporter of, which encourages, students to work together, learn from each other. And that's still going to remain really valuable as it fosters, the critical thinking and all those really important skills. And it's something as well that Peter mentioned in his keynote. Greta, you're nodding. Would you like to add something there?
Oh, I agree with everything. I don't think that we can discount the value of people and what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, if we all think back to a time when we had a new job, right? The thing that helped us learn how to do our new job wasn't necessarily the training we attended. It was the people who sat next to us, who answered our questions, who let us observe, who helped us figure out what we were doing. The training helped, certainly, but the people were so important, as were the mentors, the managers, the people who, as you said, Maeve, gave us feedback, helped us figure out how to apply the things that we were doing. And if I even go back to a case that we had in our company for years, we had a training that we did for managers where they worked through scenarios and real world applications that we asked them to do. And over again, the feedback that we got was that the bulk of the learning didn't happen when we told them what the answer to the problem was. The bulk of the learning happened in the conversations that they had with the other managers in the room, where they tried to figure out how to get to that solution and learned how other people would approach it. And so much of what we're trying to do as learning and development people isn't just figure out how to put content up on a screen. It's figuring out how to challenge people to apply that content, to think about what to do with it in the classroom and beyond. And I have not yet seen evidence that AI is going to be able to replace the role of people in doing that. Maybe it's to come, but I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
That's true, indeed. And I want to just close. I know we're nearly at time, but I think it's a really important question that I'd like to put to the panel before we finish up and explore how you might remotivate a learner that has lost interest. Carl, I know you had interesting thoughts on this. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, so I think having an open dialogue with your learners is pivotal. Getting to the root as to why a learner or a set of learners either enjoy a program or don't enjoy a program is fundamentally important. Being honest, figuring out solutions that are personalized, that are important to the learners, and the utilization of technology to provide learners with programs that suit their requirements. It's nothing too complex, nothing too complicated. You would be surprised how many organizations have a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think we all know that's just not the case. So remain in constant communication with your learners, provide them with the tools that they need to succeed, and the rest should follow quite nicely.
And then again, I think, thanks, Carla, also back to Greta, what you were mentioning about the value, the utility of what they're learning, the why as such.
Yeah, absolutely, Maeve. I think the two primary reasons where we see motivation being lost is people saying, I don't have the time to do it or to finish what I was doing, or I don't see any reason to do it. Like, I don't understand the value that I'm getting out of it. And I think value is the answer to both of those. Like, if I understand how this is going to help me do my job today, or if I understand how this is going to help me get to the career aspiration that I'm trying to accomplish, then I make the time for it, right? Then it doesn't become something extra that I have to do on top of my work. It becomes the work. And I think when we can demonstrate to people that there is that kind of value in it and help them overcome that particular challenge, then I think it's much easier to motivate people to get back into the course of learning that we're trying to drive.
Absolutely. Paraic, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, just from a higher ed perspective, Maeve, I mean, remotivation, which ultimately can lead to learner dropout, has a big financial implication for higher education institutions, depending on the country and the funding model. And remotivating students at the moment is a really person-intensive process, and it's expensive to do. So, again, I'm kind of coming back to my ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure, sort of a model in terms of keeping people motivated in the first place. But you can take those signals of learner amotivation, and instead of doing individual interventions, you can use those to redesign the curriculum in order to prevent it from happening the next time around.
Thank you, Paraic. And that's a nice note to end on. And back to you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.
Thank you, Maeve, Carl, Greta, and Paraic. That was a very stimulating panel discussion, particularly in relation to AI and the different perspectives on AI. And watch out for significant Learnovate research on many AI topics over the coming months, and we will be releasing more details very soon. Our next Link and Learn webinar takes place on the 7th of December, but between now and then we have our annual Global Learning Summit, Learnovation, which takes place on the 5th of October in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. And we hope that we will see as many of you as possible at Learnovation this year. It'll be a full day of thought leadership, learning and networking. Tickets are now on sale on our Learnovation website, and our early bird offer is available until the end of July. Thank you everyone for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.